certain periods of the year when you can do this. Often the campaign itself, when you're soliciting pledges, happens at the same time as the solicitation of pledges for the operating budget for the coming year. And people are always very nervous about, well, you know, I don't know people. But it doesn't work out that way. The caller asks the person, you know, to maintain, possibly increase their pledge to the operating budget and to consider a pledge to the capital campaign. And here is, if you think carefully and you ask rightly, it is positively amazing how frequently people will do exactly what you ask. I will tell you a story about my brother, who is cheap. He married a Roman Catholic woman, and finally, after 25 years, converted. And their son last year was ordained a Roman Catholic priest. Well, the Archdiocese of Indianapolis was doing a big capital drive, and of course, they got all the donor records from all the parishes, and everybody knew they were going to get called. My brother, who is, the nice way of saying it is very careful about money, had thought about how much he was going to give to this capital campaign effort. And he told me when he was visiting recently, he said, and when they came to talk to us, they named a number, and it was far more than I was planning to give. And I said, so Steve, what'd you do? He said, well, I gave it. Because it wasn't an unreasonable number. They could do it, you know. So the St. James, remember the you do not have because you do not ask. You ask and do not receive because you ask wrongly to spend it on your passions. If you ask rightly and you think carefully, and that would be one thing that we do before the solicitation phase, is to come up with, you know, usually me and one or two other people in the parish, come up with a number that we would ask each person to consider a gift in the neighborhood. And if you do it right, in one parish, St. Augustine's in Croton, up the Hudson, north of the city, the senior warden was the development officer at Sarah Lawrence. And man, she knew exactly what to ask people for. And we got 97% of what we asked for. So it is, as the old preacher says, you know, we have all the money we need. It's just in your pocket, but you can. But it's not. I find myself more and more saying, it really doesn't cost anything to be generous. That's what my experience has been with 30, however many years, 37, 38 years of tithing, and other, you know, and gifts on top of that. It's easy because there's nothing that makes you feel better than giving a gift to something or someone that's important to you. It's what a free person can do. You know, it's an act. And I also think it's the way, you know, the Bible says that we're made in God's image, and a great deal of ink has been spilled about what that means. I think one thing it could mean is that we experience God as giver. And so we are imitating God. We are acting the way God does when we give from the gifts that he's given us. So I just, that part of what a capital campaign can do in the lives of individuals is incredible. All right, discern. We would, if you entered into a discernment contract, I would meet with whoever you identify as the committee, the whatever you want to call it, not the capital campaign committee, the futures committee, the planning committee, because you haven't decided to have a capital campaign. You're figuring out whether you can do a capital campaign. I'd meet with the committee and we'd figure out how we were going to conduct the discernment conversations. See what your communications vehicles are. The people who would be leading the meetings, I would train them. Normally, I don't do this, but I could, facilitate a meeting. It just couldn't be on Sunday morning. I got that problem. Help with the coming up with the material that you need, and if you want it, prospect research and some other things, and a review of your stewardship, your annual stewardship campaign. Typically, and since discernment is kind of an open-ended thing, some parishes can do it quickly, in a 2 months or something like that, and the projects they've identified are fairly straightforward, and so it's not that hard to get numbers next to them and stuff like that, and go on to a feasibility study. Other parishes, there's a long lag between discernment and the feasibility study because of the difficulty of getting hard numbers for projects that involve architectural plans and stuff like that. I mean, I don't know what you're going to end up doing. And some parishes get completely lost and you never hear from them again. They can't get it together to turn those, what people talked about, into a list of projects that could be done. So it's kind of open-ended, and what you pay the foundation is driven by how much time I have to spend doing it. And I don't believe in any of the campaigns that I've run that I've ever even billed for a full day. Coming out here is half a day. Talking to you on the phone and following up by email, particularly if you keep me informed, I'm not going to bill for that. I threaten people and say, if I have to pick up the phone and say, what's going on out there, are you keeping to the schedule? Then I'll bill, but I don't, because I'm not a lawyer. I'm bad at that. And of course, I don't get $1,100 for the day. That also goes to the overhead expenses. The overhead of the capital campaign program at ECF and stuff like that. I always want to make sure that you know that. So that we have these conversations where we're trying to get people to and you stay totally away from money in these conversations, because to mention money is just a total downer. That starts to limit people's vision. Oh, we can't. This is meant to give people a place to say. I mean, I'm sure that when people come into this space, they like it. I mean, they're used to it. Important events have happened here. They love it. But I'll bet almost every single person around this table and in your congregation there's something about the building that they think, gosh, I wish that could be taken care of.
Lighting in the sanctuary.
Whatever it is, I mean,
Windows that never open or close upright.
What?
Right.
Windows that don't open and close
right.
Right. Yeah, you're right. We each walk in and say,
yeah,
I really wish X could be done.
Right.
In a perfect world.
Well, I mean, we're not going to get all the way to a perfect world, but this is a time to think. I wouldn't put it as negatively as what do you hate about these buildings, but it's a way of saying what would
make it better?
What would make the buildings better? What would make you feel better about the buildings? I mean, it's because the buildings, they express and they shape how we feel, right? And so the more welcoming and attractive they are.
How do you leap from that, though, to encourage them to be thinking about programs and things like that?
Well, I mean, there are a couple of different questions that you can ask during the and we can decide at the beginning of the as we're planning out the discernment what the approach you want to take. One parish really wanted it to be totally program driven. And one of the reasons they wanted it that way was that their goal, they had to borrow like $500,000 to finish a parish house that they'd had a campaign for that raised about 60% of what they needed. And so the operating budget was carrying this debt. And the parish wanted to have a director of religious education. And the only way they could do that was to pay off enough of the debt to free up the operating budget to, so that was sort of the programmatic connection there. You can ask a number of different questions. What ministries, what programs would you like to see? But if you ask that question, the capital campaign committee the capital campaign part of this is not going to deal with those programs. It's not going to develop those program initiatives. There have to be other people or committees or something that you can refer that to and make sure they don't get just dropped. But what programs, ministries would you like to see happen, and what would need to happen with the buildings in order to make that possible? Another thing would be, what would you like to see, what would make you feel better about being in these buildings? And another thing would be, what would it be great if Christ Church could do? I mean, they're all aimed at the same thing. I mean, a positive, non-monetary discussion about how the buildings could be improved. And so you've got that list of projects, you got the numbers, and you got people all panting for the next step. And the next step is a feasibility study. And the feasibility study takes that list of projects and those numbers and now shows people the numbers, and every single person in the parish would get a survey. Most of them are done electronically now. You mail them out to the people that can't do SurveyMonkey. Mm-hmm. One of the reasons to try to push the electronic survey is that our experience since we started is that the response rate is much higher for the electronic survey than it is for the paper survey. And the higher the response rate, the better our analysis and our recommendations. So we take that list of projects and costs and design what we call a tentative case statement. Here's an example, although a complicated one. I mean, this is one that had architectural plans and stuff. But it's usually a one-page thing, 11 by 17. We have a graphic designer that designs it, prints it. It sort of bullets the projects and puts the numbers next. Where are the numbers here? There's usually a list, with, and here's the total of it. And on the back, these are the kind of gifts we would need typically in order to get to that number. Let me see if I can find a simpler one. Well, in the back of these reports are the case statements that from some other parishes. So, I mean, you can see what we're talking about with a tentative case statement. List of projects, money. Yeah, like this. And so that's prepared and designed. Usually we send you a PDF and you print them out because you only need them for the paper surveys. Mm-hmm. It's an opportunity to get your mailing list in order.